What does it take to build a future-ready Nigeria? Is it better technology, smarter public service, or a stronger communication between the government and its citizens? It's probably all three of them. Digital transformation is no longer a private sector conversation. It's becoming central to how the government engages its citizens and delivers public service. And technology is making this future very possible, but only if we build a strong digital foundation today. And that's why you should join InfoBip and Techeconomy for an exclusive webinar tagged Future Ready Nigeria. It's happening on the 6th of August 2026, 6 to 7 p.m. Free to attend, and registrations are currently ongoing. See you there.
My name is Joyce Akiga, and I'm the Head of Strategy and Client Delivery at TBO Integrated Services, and I'll be moderating today's session. First of all, thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening. Across both the public and private sectors, organisations are under increasing pressure to deliver services that are faster, more accessible, and more responsive to the people they serve. At the same time, technologies like AI are creating new opportunities, but also raising important questions around trust, governance, and implementation. I think the good news is that becoming future ready isn't about adopting every new technology that comes onto the market. It's more about building the right foundations and designing services around people and implementing innovation in a way that delivers real value. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring this evening. I'm delighted to be joined by three fantastic panelists. Joining us today is Mr. Olatayo Ladipo Ajayi, the Regional Manager for West Africa at InfoBeep, Dr. Temitope Oyeleye, the Managing Director of TBO Integrated Services, and Mr. Taiwo Omolopo, the Senior Solutions Engineer at InfoBeep. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. So let's begin with the foundations. We often hear organizations talking about digital transformation, AI, innovation, but before any of those ambitions can actually be realized, there has to be strong foundations in place. Tayo, I'd like to start with you. In your opinion, what are the foundational capabilities organizations need if they're serious about becoming future ready?
Hi everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me and having us talk about this wonderful and very, very important topic. So in being future ready, one of the key things from my take and over the years, as we have seen the private sector and the public sector services grow, is that they're quite different. They look the same, but they're from different backgrounds. While the private sector is more nimble and agile and able to be as flexible as possible to evolve faster. The public sector service providers and structures, ministries, departments, and agencies find it a bit more difficult to do these things, not because it's just solely their fault because they don't want to innovate, but most of the time there's a lot of constraints around policies, regulations, and things like that. In being future ready for public organizations, one of the key things is to appreciate this fact and be able to, redefine what it means to be future ready from the public organizations perspective, right? And one of those things is, if you agree with me, if you look at some of the policies and some of these things that have been legacy for years, you probably won't find a term or a definition of what citizens' experience is, right? And this is a global thing. So in Africa, we see this. And one of the first steps in being future ready is to redefine what being what citizens' experience is all about, right? And one of the key things that I've done from my own learnings, and I built up a small hypothesis about how to look at these two factors when you're looking at being future ready, is two things: be able to define who the citizen is, and be able to define who the customer is. Usually they're one and the same, right? But they are in different capacities. So the customer is the guy engaging services, to buy and all that. And the citizen is, also trying to buy maybe public service or public value in some, capacity or the other. So what I've done is I put both of them together and I define them as, rather than saying the citizen and the customer, I say the citizen customer. This is a very vital part of being future ready. when we begin to understand that the citizen is a customer and the customer is the same as a citizen, then we begin to merge these two entities together. So today, the customer is expectant. They are far advanced than what the public organizations providing them in terms of services and how those services are consumed. They are already, consuming services at the tip of their fingers. They have various channels, various, places to go, including physical, pop-up shops and branches and things like that. And they know exactly where to go. And they choose the one that best resonates with them and is easier for them to consume. This is the same type of future readiness that needs to be prepared from the public organization space. The other thing that we need to look at is, after defining who this citizen customer is to lay out the definitions of how we want to build it out. And one of those principal things that form the pillar is trust. Trust, security of information, scalability of the backend, right? Accessibility, being able to be available at all times, 24/7 from various channels and various, touch points. So those are some of the things in my thinking that we need to critically look at from the public organization space. And if we're going to be selling, services, or don't let me use the word sell, if we're going to be providing services for citizen customers to consume, we must understand how they're already being served to the optimal level, right? Some other thing I'd like to say also is, when we are on the journey in defining this future readiness, we'll take some learnings from the private sector, which is very good. One of the key learnings is how a lot of the new organizations have been able to make the customer hop from in between platforms, in between service points, both physical and digital, with the same base, right? So this speaks to the last pillar that I would like to speak about, which is the core, which is the data. The data needs to be defined in such a way that it is in a central place, it is accessible by the different service providers, and they can also, when you talk about third-party providers, like payments, like, people that do things around understanding the customer journey and all that, they should be able to also tap into this data and be able to use it for the benefit of the public organizations providing those services. So, and that stands for what you call interoperability. It must be interoperable by all the people that need to help the public enterprises and public organizations provide these quality services to the citizen customer, right? So I'll probably just stop there, right? I mentioned a lot of things, and all the constraints around policies and a bit of regulation. But I think once the definitions are done and once the roadmap is drawn out and designed, it's easy to start layering these different, future ready systems on top of each other. Things like AI, for example, things like a more robust customer contact center, for example, and maybe additional channels that usually won't be a first to go to type of channel when it comes to public sector service consumption. So, and one more thing, it has to be relatable to the entire society. So it's not just providing services for the top 20% of society, but it's looking at the mass. So we need to look at inclusivity. We need to look at reaching the unreached or unserved, and also reaching the underserved. And this will speak to the types of touch points that you're going to use to reach them, right? So, let me just stop there and hope that brings some value to the point.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Tayo. You mentioned a few things kind of around trust, security, and most importantly, data. Dr. Tope, what other organizational capabilities need to sit alongside those foundations for transformation to actually truly succeed?
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. So that's really a critical, point you've raised. And honestly, this is where transformation efforts really start, because like we say, and like we know, technology is the easy part to buy, and it's much harder to build the organization around it. And in my experience at TBO, working with clients, across various sectors. 4 capabilities have to sit alongside technology for real transformation to happen. And the first, in my opinion, are the people. And then, like I used to say, technology doesn't transform anything on its own. Using it, people do invariably using it differently than before, and that means investing in change management, rescaling, and honestly addressing the fear factor, which is really very key. And if your workforce doesn't understand why the change is happening or what is in need for them, adoption will definitely stall, no matter how good the technology is. Another factor is the process. A new technology layered onto old broken processes will always give you a faster broken process. And then organizations need to redesign workflows around what the technology now makes possible, not just digitizing the status quo. Another key area is governance, which I believe it's really very important. It will be topmost on the list for me out of the 4 I'm going to highlight. And governance is most times the missing piece. Who owns the data quality? Who makes decisions where the systems flags a risk? And without clear accountability structure, roles, and decision rights, technology investment creates confusion rather than clarity, especially as you try to scale. The last one on my list, I would say strategy. And technology needs to be tied to a business outcome from day one, not deployed for its own sake. Because what we see basically is people see good technology out there, they also want to layer it on what they have. No, the organizations that succeed start with what business problem are we trying to solve? And let that pull the technology rather than starting with a shining tool and looking for a use, for a use case. And when these 4 are aligned, the people, the process, the governance, the strategy, technology now becomes a multiplier. When they are missing, even the best platform becomes like, a shelfware, that's something that people will not use at the end of the day. And that's really the difference between organizations that talk about transformation and organizations that actually realize measurable business value from it. So I will say people, processes, governance, and strategy turn technology investment into measurable business value in a nutshell.
Thank you, Dr. Sope. And I think we're seeing more kind of relevance around that and the importance of all of those various elements kind of working together. But then most importantly, it kind of highlights a key point, as you said, towards the end of, what you were saying, that technology provides the platform, but technology alone doesn't kind of transform the organization. And in summary, it's very important that these future-ready organizations need 2 things. So first of all, they need the digital infrastructure, but then they also, most importantly, need the organization capability to really turn that infrastructure into meaningful outcomes and value, as you mentioned. Thank you very much, Dr. Sope. So let's now explore what those outcomes actually look like. So one thing we've seen across almost every industry is that citizens' expectations are changing. They've changed. People are increasingly expecting government services to be intuitive, responsive, especially as digital experiences change, the ones that they receive from banks. I think Tayo touched on this very briefly. They're seeing, how they relate with banks, retailers, telecom providers, differ from what the government is providing. Tayo, we've seen in our interactions, and even as citizens ourselves, we know that, citizen expectations have changed dramatically. And what would you say great citizen engagement looks like today?
All right. Thank you, everyone. So when it comes to how AI and digital engagement comes together, I would say it comes on you have to look at it from 3 practical steps, which is the fact that AI can understand you, AI can be used to communicate, and AI can act on the information that has been given. So when we look at, look at one of the use cases, like in Nigeria now, we talk about tax and taxes and how the information that needs to go around and how all of that will come together. I think one of the first things that AI would help in this case would be how to capture the citizens' history and how to be able to also use that information to engage the citizens. For instance, you could create a conversational chatbot.
Hello, Taro. Hi,
Yes,
Taro. Sorry.
yes, please.
Uh,
The question was for you?
Before we, no, it's okay. But before we go into the AI conversations, would you mind if
Okay.
I just say a little bit
Yeah, sure. Go
concerning the
ahead.
question that Joyce mentioned? Joyce, I
All right,
think you
sure. Go
were
ahead.
trying to, okay, great. Joyce, you were trying to ask first about how how citizens' expectations
What
or
great
citizen
citizen
engagement.
engagement looks like, yes. I'll come back to you, Taiwo. Very interesting, by the way. So I'll come back to you so we can speak about the AI bit.
Yeah, I think Taiwo, I'll take a bit of this first. I think, yeah, I mean, from your AI perspective, if we roll back, let us first look at the concept of the citizen engagement topic itself and what engagement should look like today. Even before we talk AI, even before we talk multi-channel, even before we talk great service delivery. The biggest change, as we've noticed in the last few years, has been around the fact that it seems like the citizen customer is far advanced than the public uh, organizations service delivery type of models, right? And I mentioned this initially when I was talking why this is so, because of some of the constraints and all that. But we can see an example from what is happening in Rwanda, for instance. There's the Irembo government project, right? And we can see from Kenya, there is a Kenya e-citizens platform. And all of these platforms were kind of built, right, from the beginning to head into the future, long and short about it. And why did they, take some of the models that resonates with them? For example, Joyce, you mentioned something about the banking, which I spoke about earlier, and how banking, and not just banking, fintechs, telco, e-commerce, has kind of defined the direction where citizens' engagement should go, right? So today, if we are going to form citizen engagement and we take a leaf from what the private sector has done, minding the key components that needs to be put in place by the public sector, which is around trust, around being scalable, right? And also around being, I mean, blending in with the in quotes and unquote regulatory topics. It makes a total different type of hybrid, if I may use that word. So, for example, today citizen customers are already enjoying those in between, and they know exactly when service is going to come. They know where the service is in between. That responsibility should now be transferred also. And if you're looking at the expectations of citizens engagement or citizen customer engagement, those same things should fit in there. So the customer should be able to decide where he wants to go to apply for something, for instance. He should also be able to do that across different touch points, right? He should also be able to know where his application is at every milestone, right? I mean, these are the things that we see in the private sector. So this will define from the very beginning, once we get this philosophy in place, that three things are most important, right? The customer's notification, the customer's awareness, and the fluidity of the customer's engagement with the public sector enterprises. Once we put these three things in front of us, then we're beginning to build this great citizens or citizen customer engagement type of framework. Do we have it today? I mean, in Africa, a lot of public organizations are still in the birthing stage of realizing that this is most important, because it's like a chicken and egg situation. You're trying to provide services to the citizens, but you are trying to make it almost like a regulatory framework guided type of approach, which the citizens is way left behind, right? So those are some of the things that we need to look at. We need to look at examples that resonate with us. We need to also be able to draw out the roadmap to be tailored to our different segments. It might be different for tax authorities. It might be different for government utility service providers. It might be different for more mission critical service providers like the immigration service, for instance. right? The way they will approach it might be a bit different. There are things they need to, also consider and all that. So yeah, but if those three frameworks and those three, towers are adhered to, then we can see, what that future looks like today, right? Around citizen engagement. Thank you.
Tayo. Thank you. I think in a nutshell, really, like based on what I understood, it really comes from understanding, in your words, your citizen customer. And then from understanding that, you're able to kind of design better services. And then there's technology to actually deliver those services consistently. We've spoken about the importance of, the strong digital foundations and creating better citizen experiences. And I think the next question that most leaders would be asking is, what does this actually look like in practice? Because it's one thing to, have a strategy in place, but then it's another thing entirely to be able to translate that strategy, as Dr. Tope said, into measurable outcomes. Taiwo, I know you already started talking about this, but from a solutions perspective, what are some practical examples of how organizations are using AI and digital engagement to solve real business and citizen challenges today?
All right, thank you. So let me just recap where I started from earlier. So basically, when it comes to, everybody has a ChatGPT here, a Claude there, and all of that, but there's so much more that it can be used for, because when you look at in providing a solution, first of all, you need to look at what are the challenges that exist. In the use case that I mentioned earlier, when it comes to tax collection and the fact that there is a gap in terms of the education that sits around that space. Because today's you would hear, oh, this is how it works. Tomorrow you heard this is how it also works. But because AI is available, you can easily use it to first of all understand what the customer's history is or that person's history is. And then once the AI is able to understand and learn what that user's information is or history is, from there you can go next step to how do you communicate to that person? How do you provide the information that the person actually needs? Because that's where things like guardrails starts to come in, so that the information that the end user or the citizen is requesting is coming from a valid source. Because today we have social media everywhere, and someone is able to say, oh, this is how it works. But when you tie in AI into the um, environment of, say, the NRS, for instance, it's able to retrieve the specific information that speaks to the use case that the end user is trying to find about. Oh, how much do I need to pay for taxes? First of all, how do I go through the process of filing my taxes, right? So all you need to do is, once you have AI plugged into those services, all the person needs to do, for instance, because we have WhatsApp and the different channels that exist. Someone can easily type in the message to a chatbot and say, oh, I need to find out as XYZ information. And that person is able to get valid and authenticated information around the question that they are trying to ask. And also, finally, how then would what then would now be the next step, which is, after I found out what my tax amount is, how do I make payments? So the next step would be being able to retrieve endpoints that would be used to complete the payment, which is validated, so you don't go through the process of being defrauded or anything of that nature. So in summing up, what would happen is utilizing the tools that exist and tying it with the backends within those MDAs and providing citizens with specific information that meets the information that they're trying to find out. Thank you.
Thank you, Taiwo. And I think that really kind of builds on the point of so what I've been seeing with organizations as well is we need to start understanding that we need to move from this one size fits all service to a more intelligent, personalized journey. One thing that's often coming up in the conversations that we're having with leadership teams is they become very excited by these possibilities, like what you've spoken about, and immediately they start discussing use cases. Dr. Tope, when organizations identify these exciting use cases, what's the biggest mistake that they often make?
Yeah, basically, I think we've seen the pattern, and it's most always driven by excitement rather than discipline. Someone attend a conference, sees a compelling AI demo, or a competitor launches something very impressive, and suddenly there is pressure to have an AI use case fast. And that's always been the trap. And I say that the biggest mistake organizations make is chasing use cases before they've done the other less glamorous work. That means establishing strategy, governance, data readiness, and clear business priorities. Without a clear strategy, every use case looks, equally exciting, and you need to know what you are trying to move: cost, revenue, risk, customer experience, before you pick a use case. And AI system makes, probabilistic decisions most times. Who reviews the output? Who is accountable for a biased or incorrect result? Organizations that skip governance discover this, the hard way most of the time. And AI is only as good as the data behind it. Pushing ahead on siloed or inconsistent data produces unreliable outputs most of the time, which damages trust in AI initiatives more broadly. Organizations end up running several pilots simultaneously, non-resourced properly, non-tied to measurable outcomes, and that's a classic proof of concept purgatory, so to say. So organizations, like I say, a pattern I've seen play out, especially in Nigeria, banks and telcos, a chatbot or AI customer service pilot is launched with real enthusiasm, and leadership is excited. The demos looks really very great. But few months down the line, it's quietly shelved. And why? Because nobody had mapped which customer data model the actual need. So it kept giving us wrong or generic answers, and nobody had defined who was accountable when it gave a customer the wrong account information. And nobody had even tied it to a specific return on investment. Without all this clarity, when the pilot didn't show dramatic results in 1 month, it loses sponsorship, and people just pack it aside. And contrast it with organizations that really do the groundwork first. Data readiness is sorted out, a clear owner for AI governance, which is really, really very key, and a specific priority like, oh, we want to reduce average resolution time by, let's say, 20 or 30%. Those are the organizations that you see scale past those pilot stages, because success is defined and measurable from day one, not guesswork after the fact, so to say. So my key message in this regard is, don't just, focus on, use cases and all those stuff. It's not about picking the use cases before the foundation is in place. Get your strategy right, get your governance right, get your data readiness, and have a clear priority right first. And then those use cases will follow. And you are more likely to succeed in that when you have all those things in place before, just jumping on use cases. So for me, I will say the key message is, don't just chase use cases before establishing your governance, your strategy, your data readiness, and having a clear business, priority before you run with AI. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Dr. Soper. And I think this is something that we're becoming quite great preachers at in TBO. It's not about finding the most impressive AI use case, but it's more about making sure the organization is actually ready to support it, as just honing on to what Dr. Soper said. And I think that's a really important takeaway. Digital transformation isn't just about deploying AI everywhere overnight. It's more about kind of identifying those meaningful problems, solving them properly, and demonstrating value to make sure that you can scale them more. Thank you very much, Dr. Soper and Taiwo, for that. So moving on to kind of AI, and it clearly has enormous potential, but alongside the excitement that we've been seeing from, leadership and organizations comes an equally important conversation around responsibility. So similar to what Dr. Tope was saying, organizations are in a, rush to innovate, but they also need to make sure that they're protecting citizens and maintaining that trust that Taiwo spoke about, and complying with the evolving regulations. Taiwo, what would you say responsible AI implementation actually looks like in practice?
Right.
Okay, is that for Taiwo or for me? Tayo and Taiwo. Okay, go ahead.
I believe it's for me.
Okay.
Responsible AI. So let me sort of build on what Dr. Temitope has said so far. It's mainly around the fact that it's like, let me use this analogy, building a house. You don't start from the roof, right? When you want to build a house, you start from considering what is the foundation. And in terms of when it comes to using AI, the foundation speaks to security, transparency, privacy, governance, and what is very key, creating guardrails. When it comes to security, what is the source of the data or information that is being retrieved from that AI? Because like Dr. Tokwe said, AI is as good as the information that is trained on. So the first step would be to ensure that that data that is, or the knowledge base is from a secured, approved environment or source, so that is when you ask any questions, the AI provides it within the scope of what the guardrails allows. So in cases where you don't provide those guardrails, you don't restrict or scope what the AI is allowed to provide information around, that's when things like hallucinations happen and it starts to generate a lot of information outside the borders of what it is allowed to do. And another thing we can look at here is transparency. That information that is provided at the end of the day, if someone says, like Dr. Tokwe said, oh, some wrong information was provided, how do you track it, right? How do you do an audit of that information that has been provided? That's where things like transparency comes in to play. And finally, additionally, privacy. We are in a space where, a time rather, where um, privacy around people's data is very key. And that's why Nigeria came up with the National Data Protection Act to ensure that before you access an information or a PII, that means a personal identifiable uh, data, you need to be sure that that information is used for that specific purpose and not outside of what it is requested for, and not by a third party outside of whoever is actually requesting that information. And finally, governance. In With all of the capabilities that AI has, right, you need to have somebody who has put an eye on what is actually happening in terms of human oversight, so that the AI doesn't just have free reign on doing anything that it wants to do. So that way, you put that governance, somebody's watching and has uh, overview of what's happening within that space of what the AI is allowed to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyro. I really liked your analogy about building a house. It really reinforces the idea that governance isn't something, you bolt on later. It really has to be designed in from the very beginning. And Dr. Toba, just to kind of build on that, if Tyro has kind of described what responsible AI looks like technically, what does it look like organizationally? How do leaders, how should they think about governing AI beyond the technology itself?
Thank you very much. So for me, this very, an important distinction, so to say. I believe responsible AI is not a one-time milestone you achieve and move on, from. It's a continuous discipline, because AI systems, unlike traditional software, keep learning and keep encountering new data and keep operating in environments that change around them. Yeah, imagine a bank deploy a credit scoring AI model that performs well at launch, but maybe a year later, customer behavior has shifted and the model's assumption no longer match reality. Without continuous monitoring, nobody notices until the model starts declining good customers or approving risky ones at a higher rate. And we see that happen over and over nowadays. Or an organization writes a solid governance policy for 1 or 2 use cases. 18 months later, they have 12 AI systems across departments each introduced by a different team. Without a scalable framework, you end up with shadow AI, systems nobody centrally tracks, or even give the example of a telco, rolling out an AI tool for customer service agents. Maybe 3 or 6 months later, half of the agents have quietly reverted, to old habits because the tools wasn't reinforced or improved based on feedback. An organization build, a strong ROI case, gets budget, deploys, then never measures against that case again. A year later, nobody can say with confidence whether the AI delivered the promised value. And this is really very key. And that's why, we have regulatory, stores, the NDPA, and so on and so forth, being put in place. But for me, my key message would be responsibly AI isn't a destination you reach a go live. It's a discipline you sustain. Continuous monitoring, governance that scale, adoption that is reinforced, and value realization measured again and again. Organizations that treat AI governance like financial control or cybersecurity are the ones really that will still keep running, a trustworthy and valuable AI system, many years, to come. So for me, my key message will be that responsible AI requires continuous governance, like I've said with my other points, monitoring, adoption, and value realization.
Thank you, Dr. Soper. And I think that just goes to say that kind of once AI has been deployed, organizations still need to make sure that it's, being governed efficiently over time. I think we've come to establish that governance is very critical. But from a citizen's perspective, as Tayo and Tyro have touched on, trust also remains equally important. And the success of any AI solution depends on whether citizens actually trust it. Tayo, from your perspective, how can organizations ensure AI strengthens trust and citizen engagement rather than creating new barriers between citizens and the services they're trying to access?
Okay, thank you, Joyce. And I think taking off from where Taiwo and Tammy dropped off, I think my direction will be more focused around the realities, right? So trust can be seen in two ways, right? You can see trust as from the perspective of the citizen customer, and you can see trust from the perspective, that's the person consuming the product, right, and the services, and trust from the perspective of even the operators of these public entities, right? So, I mean, it's baby steps. For me, building trust will start first with, this same framework and guardrails and validating security, ensuring that people are guided. But I mean, more importantly for me personally, I have I belong to a school of thought around what we call IA, right? We say it's intelligence augmentation, right? And from that school of thought, it's more of how do we use AI to support the humans, right, in the aspects of work that is repetitive, aspects of work that is time consuming, that's just a process, does not really require some approval or some critical, focus and things like that. And these particular framework that's going to be drawn up by the public sector will more or less focus on that, right? In the beginning days, right? And there's a challenge with when people from the outside, especially people driving, like I said, the two aspects, the consumers and the people driving this public sector driven type of AI introduction will they lose their jobs, right? From their perspective, right? So if you're able to provide that grounding to let them know that, look, it's structured in a way where it's not designed to, take people out of their jobs. It's designed to help people evolve into more, critical decision-making roles and jobs or tasks, while the mundane and repetitive aspects of it is taken over by AI for specific reasons. The other thing is selling the value to all stakeholders that this is going to make us more effective. For example, ensuring that the cost to serve the people is, brought to the barest minimum, right? For example, governance is now available 24/7. When the human closes by 5, 4, or 6, determines what part of the world they're from, then AI takes over. So when there's well-defined rules are done and it's open to everybody, nothing is being hidden, and all these interesting guardrails and security features that Taiwo and Tammy mentioned are implemented, then you begin to build trust. From the side of the consumer or the citizen customer, right, that I call it, they must know when they are engaging with AI. This must be announced in some form because private sector is quite different. Like I told you, I mean, one of the big mistakes that we make from the private sector, something that we really think about at InfoBip is we can't relate to the public sector the exact equation that solves a problem in the private sector to the public sector, right? It differs. So in the private sector, you don't really need consent to talk to an AI tool. Maybe in the public sector, we need to create this form. And like you said, building trust requires consent as well. So for you to make me face an AI agent or whatnot, you need to tell me that I'm facing an agent. If I'm dealing with an agent, let me know it's an agent, right? And if I decide to continue with the journey, yeah, so be it. But if I desire to be with a human, so be it, right? So we need to be flexible. We need to look at all the spectrum, and be able to show all these things that Taiwo and Tammy have mentioned earlier in real terms, right? Especially how the solutioning and the customer journey is built, putting all those things in between, right? I mean, that is where trust will start.
Thank you, Tayo. I think it's been very insightful, kind of, hearing from different perspectives. Dr. Tope from an organizational perspective, Tayo from, a solutions perspective, and yourself, Tayo, from, a citizen customer perspective. That's a new word that I've learned today, my key takeaway. It's kind of very interesting to know how all of these may exist independently, but there's a real kind of key importance on, interconnected capabilities between these and us being able to view them from all these different lenses and make them kind of work together to actually serve citizens in the best way. I'd like to open the question up to the whole panel. What do you think one thing that government, technology providers, and the private or public sector actually need to do differently over the next 3 years if Nigeria is actually going to become future ready? You can go, Tayo.
Okay, let me go before Tayo goes. So for me, I think there should definitely be collaboration across the ecosystem. Very essential to really accelerate sustainable digital transformation. And then for us, I believe that no single actor, government, technology providers, or the private sector can make Nigeria future ready alone. Almost everything we've discussed today, the people, the processes, the governance, citizens' journey, data readiness, all depends on collaboration across the ecosystem and not any one player, working in isolation. Like I say, I believe that government need to also move from being only policymaker to maybe platform builders. And we are seeing good movement with NDPA review and the upcoming national AI strategy that is in the works. But the real role over the next few years is building shared infrastructure. Everybody else, builds on something that's interoperable and then something that secures digital identity, open AI for public services. Also for technology providers, they also need to move from selling solutions to co-designing, outcomes. I say what we need in Nigeria is providers willing to sit at the table early, understand the actual outcome being pursued, and build with local context in mind, rather than just dropping in a global template. And that's the model we try to bring in TBO. We are not just implementing technology, we are partnering on the outcome. And that's one of the reasons why we work closely here with InfoBip. And also the private sector needs to move from competing on technology to collaborating on ecosystem readiness. Individual investment is good, but definitely not enough. The digital skill pipeline, shared, data standards, sector-wide, interoperability need private sector players to collaborate, sometimes even with competitors on the foundational layer. So a lot of things comes into play, but for me, collaboration across the ecosystem is very essential to accelerate, sustainable digital transformation. I will yield the floor to Olatayo. I know he has a lot more to say to this.
Okay, thank you very much, Semi. I mean, you said it all. Collaboration, co-building, right? I mean, it can never be overstated. Like, look, we need to co-build. I mean, it's a good thing also. One key thing I will say we need to do more of is identifying key players with experience. I mean, like Timmy mentioned, in this space. And the public service space is quite unique because everything you seem to do there seems to be pioneering, because not many people, I mean, if you search for yourself around topics around citizens experience, engagement, and all that, you find little material because it's not a common space. People don't see it as, because people don't see the citizens as a customer. Like in my terms, I say citizen customer. They don't see it as an area where we need to look at. But there's so much embedded in that. I mean, it's tied to how you grow revenue. It's tied to how you save costs. It's tied to how you impact society. It's tied to how you reach out to the unreached people of society and all that. So yes, collaboration is number one thing. Choose your partner very carefully and with all understanding that the person understands the journey, but what you need as a public service provider is someone that understands the journey from another aspect and merge with your learnings and your guardrails and your intentions, right, to form something great. So this is something I believe we're trying to start this whole generation of thinkers in this line and collaborators, and hopefully we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tayo. Thank you, Dr. Sope. I think that just reinforces the famous saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you very much. We have a few questions coming from the audience, but due to time, I'm only going to kind of ask one. I think, Tayo, maybe this might be one for you. How do you convince leadership to invest in improving citizens' experiences when they're focused on cutting costs?
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Is that
Taiwo or
Taiwo?
Taiwo. Okay, go ahead. Is
All
that
right.
Taiwo or Taiwo?
I think it's probably me.
It was I did say Tayo, but feel free, whoever, anyone can.
Okay. I think the way to encourage about management or the government about cost cutting is about mainly about looking at how they approach this. Because if someone wants an information, for instance, and the person needs to try different points to get that information, you are at the end of the day incurring more cost. So if there is a means of getting that information the first time, you have reduced cost that way. So that's more like where you implement AI. So where there's a specific source of that information, once you reach for that information and that information is validated and the actual information that the person is looking out for, it means that that person doesn't need to check multiple sources. One, that person doesn't need to call a contact center. Two, because he has one validated source of that information. So one of the things that would happen in this case would be, how do you invest in AI at the same time? Because of how quickly it provides back feedback, you are inadvertently cutting cost at the same time. Tayo, do you have any additional take?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right on point, Taiwo. What you've mentioned is right on point. I mean, to add to that, the term cost to serve is very key. I mean, if you put it from the business perspective, right, what you just mentioned is around cost to serve. If it costs the public service provider X, let's say 1,000 naira to engage X customer today, and they are able to use a well-defined customer experience, well-defined set of solutioning to make that cheaper. I mean, that is also, savings turns into profitability, as it were. So, I mean, all those things speak to each other. And if they see it as an investment into cost rather than, something that goes side by side, then, we need to reevaluate that, So this is where the divide is, Then we need to look at case studies, what countries have done and has impacted them positively over time. Some of these investments need to be done because it like I tell people, when you say, oh, calculate the ROI and all that, and I say there's some ROIs that you can calculate, because they're embedded in operations, right? It's not about how much you're spending here, how much are you saving by not spending it. Can you equate that in naira and kobo, dollars and cents? Can you look at the cost of people impacting your contact center? I mean, in the place where the government has one, or people getting disgruntled, sad. Can you give a value to the sad index of a citizen that is because of the lack of you investing in innovation is not happy with the government? That is invaluable. You can't do an ROI on that. So these are some of the things we need to look at. It's a broad spectrum, right, of the value that innovation, investing in these type of things, engaging customers. And there's a broader perspective of it that nobody seems to understand, that when you create a formidable citizen customer experience, you are able to evaluate, learn, and understand and know the customer better. Just like what the e-commerce banks looking at spend culture, spend trends. They've done these old graphs. They can tell you how much you're going to spend, where you're going to spend it, when you're going to spend it, and things like that. And government, public platforms also need this type of information to be able to know what to invest in, what to do more of, less of, and things like that. Right. So it's rather than going blind. These investments need to be made, and we need to see it in the big picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Tayo. Thank you, Tyro. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But before we wrap up, I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights and practical experiences this evening. I believe we've covered a lot of ground. We've spoken about building strong digital foundations, creating kind of citizen customer services, translating strategy into execution, and more importantly, adopting AI responsibly. I believe that today we've kind of just scratched the surface, and these are conversations that deserve a much deeper discussion. And that's kind of what our upcoming event is for, the Nigeria MDA and Financial Sector Summit that's happening in a few weeks in Abuja, where we'll kind of have leaders from government, financial services, technology, and the wider public sector just come together and really explore these topics in greater depth and share practical approaches around how we can accelerate digital transformation across Nigeria. We'll be sharing more details around kind of how to register with everyone who's joined today's webinar, and we'll be delighted to kind of have you join that conversation as well. But thank you once again to our panelists. Thank you to Techeconomy and InfoBoot for bringing us together. And to everyone who joined this evening, thank you very much, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you.
Want to make sure your voters are informed? This election season, set up a chatbot to answer all of their burning questions. Empowered by InfoBip's reliable communication technology, chatbots can help you inform every person, engage every voice, and empower every vote in your community. By offering always-on access to verified information over the channels your people already know and trust. Elections are just around the corner. Act now to expand your reach with our advanced chatbots. Empower every vote with InfoBip.